Yes, Dr. Raja, just started the recording. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, once again, everybody, thank you for participating in this discussion. It is an honor and a privilege to be making this presentation in front of you all. This is the fourth of the different sessions that we've had. So soon, it's coming to an end. We have one more remaining that we will have Friday next week. So I will jump right into it. So far, we've talked about the beginning of Sundarkand, which really describes the setting at the shore where Hanumanji and the rest of the party that was directed to go in search of Mata Sita in the southern direction are waiting at the shore. They have heard from Sampati that Ravan has taken Mata Sita and has gone over to Lanka, and they were wondering what to do next. And that is where Hanumanji's spiritual awakening occurs. And Jamwant reminds him of his purpose, and he takes off and goes off into Lanka. And then in the second session, we discussed what occurred all throughout his trip, the different challenges that he faced and how he overcame those challenges and what those mean for us. The third part, we focused on his time in Lanka, the different interactions he had. He had interactions with Vibhishan, he met with Mata Sita, and then he had face-to-face interactions with Ravan himself. And today we are going to talk about Hanumanji's return from Lanka. And this will be an important session for a few different things. One reason is that up to this point in the Sundarkand, Bhagwan Sri Ram has not yet come in his physical form yet. He has been mentioned, he has been talked about, he has been referred to, but he as a character has not yet come into the story. He will enter the story in this part of the Sundarkand. This is also very noteworthy because not a whole lot of Tulsidas Ji does not spend a whole lot of time describing everything else that's occurring. It's almost superfluous, but he spends a lot of time and a lot of emphasis. And it's not obvious until you start reading that the verbiage and the artistry in his written language is really focused at the conversation that occurs between Hanumanji and Sri Ram. When Hanumanji is reporting the tidings, when he tells of what he has heard and what he has seen in Lanka and what the message of Mata Sita is. And what is the effect of that entire conversation that occurs? And then as a result of that, this section or this session will end with the army marching to the shores. And then in the next session, we will discuss the occurrences since that event, what happened in Lanka after Hanumanji left and what happened at the shore. And we will have Vibhishan meeting with Sri Ram, and then the march towards Lanka. And Sundarkand ends with the arrival of Sri Ram and the entire army at the shores of Lanka. So we will tackle that in the next session. So where we left off last time, just as a review, Hanumanji burns Lanka, and his burning of Lanka, we noted, was not just an act to destroy the place, but it needed to burn because it delivered effectively, very effectively, a whole set of messages. And we went through those last time. We went through the fact that it delivered a message to Ravan that if a servant of someone, and Hanumanji had always mentioned that he was a servant of Sri Ram, if someone's servant, A, and B, not Dev, not a deity, not a god, and not human, but a monkey. So a servant of somebody and a monkey at that, if that person could cause so much destruction of Lanka, then what would happen if the actual person himself would come, who people say is Nar Narayan. He is Narayan in the human form. Just imagine what kind of destruction of Lanka could take place then. So that was sort of the message that was being delivered to Ravan. But there was a message that was also being delivered to Mata Sita, which is don't be afraid, have no fear, keep faith in Sri Ram. He will come and save you with his army. There was also the message delivered to Vibhishan that don't worry, despite everything that is about to happen to Lanka, nothing will happen to you. Because it is again noted in the description that when all of Lanka was burned, only two places did not get burned. That was Vibhishan's house and Ashokavan, where Sita Mata was. So this is also a message to Vibhishan that you will remain protected because you have already come under the protection of Sri Ram. You have considered him your supreme person, and so you will be under his tutelage, under his guidance, and under his protection. And then the last message was to the people of Lanka that basically, look, your ruler, your king, the person who walks around, brags about all the strength and power he has, could not even defend you against one monkey. So do you really trust this leader? Or should you already start thinking about the next leadership? And this was very important because this is, I've heard a few commentators, and one spent a very big deal behind this and said, look, this is essentially within our philosophy. And by within our philosophy, he said, and this type of philosophy is still persistent in India, where we haven't been conquerors historically. We have been conquered, but we're not necessarily conquerors or invaders. And whenever we have been forced into war, India has been forced into war and India has taken over territory. India doesn't keep that territory. Always the king is selected, or the next ruler is selected from within the locals, and then we hand over the territory to the local government and we leave. This type of approach is clearly seen here in Ramayana, where Sri Ram, if wanted, could have placed himself and Lakshman as the kings of Lanka, but that was not the intent. The intent was always to free Lanka from the clasps of Ravan and then establish a leadership that was a local leadership, and that is of Vibhishan. So very, very subtle but important political lessons here as well that could be learned. But then again, it is Hanumanji who sowed that first seed of doubt against Ravan in Lanka, that Ravan is probably not able to protect his people. But I want to stress on the lesson or on the message that was delivered to Sita Mata, because it will come up again here in a little bit. He's trying to deliver the message that Sita Mata, don't be afraid, Sri Ram Bhagwan will come to protect you. And that was important because after he burns Lanka, Hanumanji rests. He puts out the fire from his tail and then he rests. And so these are the descriptions that come in Sri Ramcharitmanas. Pooch bujhai khoi shram dhari lag roop bahori Janak suta ke aage thad bhayo kar jodi. So Hanumanji extinguishes the fire from his tail, and then he assumes a small form once again. And after having assumed that small form, he goes over to Sita Mata and he holds his hands together or joins his palms together in prayer. And then he is trying to communicate with her. And he says, Matu mohi dije kachu chinha jaise raghunayak mohi dinha. Mata, give me some token, give me some symbol that I can take with me to Sri Ram to prove to him that all is well with you. Just like he gave the ring for you, give me something as well. Churamani utari tab dayo harish samet pavan sutlayo. She gave her Churamani and he received it with excitement, with joy. Kahe utat asmor pranama, sab prakar prabhu puran kama. That's when Sita Mata starts giving him the message that she wants him to deliver. She said, start by offering obeisance or prayers to Sri Ram on my behalf. Kahe utat as more pranama. I'm doing pranam to Sri Ram. Please start with offering that first. Sab prakar prabhu puran kama. With his blessings, all will be fine, all is complete. Deen Dayal Biridh Samhari. Remind Sri Ram that he is always kind to those who are afflicted, who are in pain, who are in suffering. Harahu Nath Mama Sankat Bhari. Now request to him at that point to take care of my pains, to take care of my distress, because I am in pain, a lot of distress, and I'm going through a lot of difficulty. Tat sakat sut katha sunayo, ban pratap prabhu samujhayo. And she says at that point, remind Sri Ram that there was a time when Jayant had assumed the form of a crow and he came and struck my foot. And at that point, Sri Ram had gotten so upset that he took the arrow and he shot the arrow at Jayant. And that arrow followed him across the different planes of the universe, wouldn't let go until he came back and fell to Sri Ram's feet and asked for apologies. So remind him of that time, that such a small and little pain that occurred to me, and he did such a big thing to go against it or to fight against it. And yet here I am under much bigger distress and much bigger trouble, and I need him to come rescue me. And then she gives him an ultimatum. She says, Maas divas mahunath na awa, to puni mohi jiyat nahi pawa. If in a month and a day he does not come, he will not find me alive here. Kaho kapi kehi vidhi rakho prana, tumahu tat kahat abjana. She's saying, look, I was in distress, I was in pain, and then I had one point of relief that you, my son, had come here and brought my Lord's message to me. And now even you are leaving. How do you expect me to survive? Express how difficult I am and what difficulty I am right now to Sri Ram when you go see him. To hi dekhi sitali bhai chhati, puni mahu koi soi din sorati. Seeing you, my chest was relieved or expounded with courage and bravery. But with you leaving now, I don't know how I'm going to feel again. And so she expresses a lot of grief here and a lot of worry and concerns. And there's a beautiful interaction that takes place here where Hanumanji then tries to convince her that don't worry, I will deliver your message. It is my responsibility. And Sri Ram takes care of all of his devotees, and he loves you so much. Don't worry at all. But he also notices what's really happening here, right? Because if you recall, when he first saw her, he was sitting above the tree. This is what the interaction was going on between Mata Sita and Trijita. Trijita was one of the Rakshasis that was assigned to guard Mata Sita at the forest, at the Ashokvan. At that point, before she had met Hanumanji, she was saying, Trijita san boli kar jodi, matu bipat sangini tay mori, tajau dehi karu begi upai, tu sahu birahu ab nahi sahi jai. Ani kath rach chita banai, matu anal puni dehi lagai. At that point, Mata Sita was telling Trijita to just gather some wood so that she could set up a fire, chita, so that she would just go into the fire and end the situation there. She did not want to continue to suffer in Lanka at all anymore. From that state of mind, and after interacting with Hanumanji, and now having seen the whole of Lanka burn, And as Hanumanji is leaving, the following is what Sita Mata is telling him. Mas divas mahunath na ava to puni mohi jiyat nahi pawa. So from I cannot sustain life anymore, I am going to walk into the fire now. She goes into a state of, I'm giving the Lord 1 month and 1 day to come and rescue me. So this is important here because it's subtle, but it's clear that her state of mind has changed. She has gained the courage to sustain herself for some more time, to give time to the practicality of Sri Ram Bhagwan coming to her, fighting the war, and then rescuing her. That additional courage only showed up because of two things. One, she met Hanumanji, and two, she saw Hanumanji's valorous actions. And so if we go back to what I was referring to earlier as the messages that were supposed to be delivered from the burning of Lanka, Hanumanji was effective. He effectively delivered that message that Sita Mata should not be afraid and she should be confident. And if nothing else, he bought a month and a day for the rescue effort to take place. So then Hanumanji leaves after consoling Sita Mata, and Valmiki Ramayana spends more time on the trip back, but Tulsi Kirit Ramayana or Sri Ramcharitmanas, there's not a lot of detail. All that's described is Hanumanji takes off and then he arrives, and nothing in between is discussed. And upon arrival, he meets with Jamwant and he meets with the team that he had left at the shore. He had told them to eat root crops and fruits until he returns. And they had all promised each other that if they could not find Sita Mata, they were all going to give up their lives because they didn't want to go in front of Sri Ram as failures. And upon seeing Hanumanji, they all realized that none of them was going to die. They were going to make it through, and they were going to go back and report the tidings to Sri Ram. And then they go meet Sugriv, and then Sugriv takes them to meet Sri Ram and Lakshman. So yes, there's a chain of command here, and yes, it looks like this is bureaucracy, because why couldn't Hanumanji go directly to Sri Ram? He knows where he is. Why does he have to go see Jamwant first? Then why do they have to go see Sugriv first? Yes, the structure is there. I agree, and we could give it off as they're all just trying to follow structure. But is it really about structure? I think it's more than that. I think what this is trying to display is that within the structure, there is a lot of trust, faith, and partnership that is taking place here. Let's recall that only Hanumanji is known as Ramdut, and only Hanumanji had the courage to cross over into Lanka and do all those things that he did and come back, and then now they are going up to meet Sri Ram. And yet he's not going directly, which means there is a certain level of trust that exists between Hanumanji and Jamban, and between Hanumanji and Angad. They trust each other, and that bond that they have is critical to the success of the entire team and to the success of all of the objectives. So if we look today, I mean, I see this in my corporate structure a lot, that whenever you don't trust your next level supervisor and you go a layer above that and you go to the next person, overall, there's a lot of dysfunction in that situation. What we're seeing here is that there's no dysfunction in this ranking order that exists. Why is that? Why is there no dysfunction here? Why does Hanumanji trust Jamwan? Jamwan trusts Angad. Angad trusts Sugriv. What's going on? Well, I think it's all because of selfless service. Every single one of them is not in this for themselves. Hanumanji doesn't get anything from rescuing Sita Mata, nor does Jamwant, nor does Angad. Yeah, Sugriv made a promise to Ram Bhagwan, and Lakshman almost threatened him into compliance. But there is a selfless aspect of their service here. they're doing this for somebody else. And they have a common objective, something that they have all agreed upon, that this is the objective that they're going to meet. And so this is why I think this works well, is because they all have the same objective and they agree to work together. The bureaucracy works in their favor here rather than against them. And that is because they are all marching towards the same direction and they are all trying to achieve the same objective, and neither one of them is doing it for themselves. So just this subtle notes of one going to the next, then to the next, then to the next. I think there is a hidden story there, and that's what I'm seeing, at least, is they all trust each other. And if in our daily lives we want this to work the same way, well, we all have to march in the same direction as well, and we all have to trust each other as a team as well. Now is the point where Sri Ram Bhagwan actually enters as a character in Sundarkand. So the team from the south is approaching. All of the other teams have already arrived. They have already reported that they did not find Sita Mata, and this is the last team. And Sugriv is announcing Jai Shri Ram from the distance. All the monkeys are dancing, screaming. And again, I think I don't know myself. I have not read Valmiki Ramayana, but I think Dr. Raju could comment on that later. But there's a difference again here as to how the report is actually made to Sri Ram. The way it is in the Tulsidas Ramayana, he essentially, Sri Ram essentially is already aware that all is fine. They have found Sita Mata based on how the team is behaving as they are approaching, because they're all jumping, dancing, singing his glories, screaming Jai Shri Ram. So they're all in a happy mood. And they were all aware of the fact that this team had said that if they couldn't find Sita Mata, they would not come back. And yet they're back, which means it must have worked out well. And Ram kapin jab avat dekha kiye kaj man harsh vishesa. When he saw them, immediately he realized that the mission has been accomplished, that they have achieved their objective, and he was immediately delighted by that. Patikasila baithe do bhai. Shri Ram and Lakshman were sitting on huge crystal seats, the crystal rocks. Phatik, like spatik is what we call it, right? There is a sphatic ling, the Shiv-ling made of crystal. So they were sitting on these crystal rocks as their seats. And then the monkeys that came in that team all approached them and came to Sri Ram Bhagwan's feet. प्रीति सहित सब भेंटे रघुपति करुणा पुंज पूछी कुशल नाथ अब कुशल देखि पद कंज. They all saw each other. Sri Ram Bhagwan asked if everybody was well. They all reported that all is well, especially now that they see Sri Ram, they are in front of him, everything is fine. And then Jamwant is the person doing the reporting here. And again, I'll ask Dr. Raji to comment on this in the end if he remembers, but I had heard somebody talk about this before, that in the Valmiki Ramayana, it's actually very carefully worded that that Sri Ram should not get the wrong message from the very first word that is said. Tulsi Ramayana doesn't go into that much detail, but instead it goes through, again, the same protocol, where Hanumanji is not the one directly telling Sri Ram what happened. It's Jamwant, the head of that team, reporting. जामवंत कह सुन रघुराया जा पर नाथ करो तुम दाया ताहि सदा शुभ कुशल निरंतर सुर नर मुनि प्रसन्नता ऊपर सोई विजयी विनयी गुण सागर तास सुजस त्रय लोक उजागर प्रभु की कृपा भयो सब काजू जन्म हमार सुफल भाजू नाथ पवन सुत कीनी जो करनी सहस मुख न जाय सो बरनी पवन तनय के चरित सुहाए जामवंत रघुपति सुनाए. So Jamwant starts describing Sri Ram's praises. He says, it's because of you that we are able to achieve anything and everything. All of our victories come from you, despite you acting so modest. and so on. And then he says, Nath pavan sut keen jo karni, sahaso mukh na jai so barni. Nath, what Pavan Sut has done, even if Sahasmukh is Sheshnath, he has so many heads, right? So Sahasmukh na jai so barni. Pavan tarit tanay ke charita suhai. He starts describing the charitra, the behaviors of Hanumanji from when he took the trip to Lanka. Jamwant Raghupati hi sunai. Jamwant's the one who describes it to Raghupati. Now, what follows, I think, is really the heart of this part of the Sundarkand, which is the direct interaction that occurs between Sri Ram and Hanumanji. So far, Jamwant has given the report. What happens next is very interesting because Sri Ram from here on does not ask questions to Jamwant. He asks questions from Hanumanji directly. This is again a very important point. I've noticed this again at work, and I don't know if that is true for many of you, but a good leader, I have to report to my supervisor who goes to the next, who goes to the next. The decision making is done 2 levels or 3 levels up. But a good leader will not only listen to his direct reports, but will also listen to those that are directly on the task. Because sometimes when you play this pass the message game, the message could change. And so this is a critical situation that we are seeing here, right? Sri Ram is missing Sita Mata. It's very critical. The only team who he thinks may have the report has come back, and he needs to know everything top to bottom. So he's going to skip the layers in between, and he's going to go straight to the person who actually did it. No disrespect to the layers in between, but accuracy is key in this situation. And so a direct interaction now occurs between Sri Ram and Hanumanji. Sunat kripa nidhi man ati bhaye, puni Hanuman harash hi kaho tat ke hi bhanti janki, rahati karati racha swapran ki. So the first question he asks Hanumanji is, how is Janak's daughter? Tell me. And how does she pass her days? But more importantly, how is she staying alive? That's the question he asks. So now Hanumanji has a huge responsibility. He has to deliver Sita Mata's message just like he did Sri Ram's message. He delivered Sri Ram's message to Vibhishan, to Sita Mata, to Ravan, and to everyone in Lanka. He needs to do it with the same efficacy and with the same accuracy back to Sri Ram. What are the things he needs to consider? He needs to be honest and accurate, first and foremost. He can't make things up, right? Secondly, he needs to provide relief to Sri Ram. Sri Ram is in a state where he's really worried, really concerned what's going on. But he can't make him feel so at ease that he starts neglecting what needs to be done next and says, oh, we've got time, right? So he needs to provide relief, but he also needs to maintain a certain sense of urgency and pain and this fire in Sri Ram that we need to go and get Sita Mata. And it should result in the rapid response because he knows he's been given a month and a day by Sita Mata. So Hanumanji takes an emotional route to achieving the success and delivering this message. And it's become so emotional that, as I had mentioned before, the Tulsidas Ramayan starts with Shivji narrating the story to Uma. And he says that in that story, the same question was asked by Garur to Kagbhushundi, and Kagbhushundi is describing it to Garur. So when you hear this emotional description, for a brief moment, we will backtrack and we will see that even Shivji almost loses control over his emotions at the description of the situation. Naam paharu divas nisi dhyan tumhar kapat, लोचन निज पद जंत्रित जाहि प्राण के ही बात. It's your name that protects her day and night. she keeps thinking of you. She knows that it's you who are protecting her. She's constantly sitting, looking at her own feet, not here, not there, focused on you. And though she wants to escape from that life, she is not even escaping from that life because of her dedication to you. So in very brief words, he's saying she wants to die, but she doesn't want to die because she's still so dedicated to you. And then he goes, Chalat mohi chura mani dini raghupati hriday lai soilini nath jugal lochan bhari bari bachan kahe kachu janaka kumari. So he hands him the chura mani as proof that he really did meet Sita Mata. Sri Ram Bhagwan takes it, puts it to his heart, and then he goes describing with Nath Jugal Lochan Bhari Bari. Sita Mata said the following for you with tears in her eyes. Bachan kahe kach janaka kumari anuj samet gahyo prabhu charana. So he starts with, remember, Sita Mata told him that first offer my prayers and obeisance to Sri Ram. And he starts with that. And he says, she's saying, Anuja Samet. So with Lakshman, she's coming to your feet and offering her obeisance. Deen Brandhu Pranatarati Harana. She's referring to you as somebody who could relieve all of the miseries of a person. मन क्रम बचन charan anuragi kehi aparadh nath ho tyagi. So Hanumanji here twists the words a little bit, but he covers the spirit of the message. And he says, she's praying to you and asking, what was her mistake that you have abandoned her? Why have you forsaken her? Mata Sita never said those words, but Hanumanji is using those words to deliver an impactful message. Avagun ek mor mein mana bichurat pran nakeen payana. That Sita Mata is saying, she made one mistake. Why did you abandon her? That her only mistake was that her life did not leave her when she was being taken away from you. And for that mistake, why have you punished her and abandoned her? So very impactful words to sort of shake up Sri Ram Bhagwan. Nath sunenani ko aparadha nishrat pran karai hati badha birh aginatan tul samira swas jadai chan mahi sarira. The agony that she is living in is like a fire that in one breath could burn the entire body. That is how painful and agonized form she is living in, or situation she's living in. Nayan Shravai Jalu Nij Hit Lagi Jadai Na Pav Deh Birhagi. But at the same time, she's crying so much that her body is so wet that fire couldn't even burn her. That's how wet she is from her tears. Sita Kayati Bipati Bisala. Her troubles and her pains are so vishal, are so huge. Binahi kahe bhali deen dayala. But she's still praying to you and saying, please come save me, please rescue me, Bhagwan. निमिष निमिष करुणा निधि जाहि कलप समबीति बेगी चलिए प्रभु आनिए भुज बल खल दल जीति. He's saying, every moment I'm speaking here, talking to you, it's like passing of an age for her. So we need to move quickly, Lord, and we need to go take care of her. And we need to rescue her. And he becomes clearly effective here. Hanumanji becomes clearly effective because as soon as that description ends, Tulsidas ji describes the following for Sri Ram. Sunasita dukh prabhu sukh ayana bhariyaye jal rajiv nayana. When Sri Ram heard of Sita Mata's agony, the pleasure that he had felt, the happiness that he felt seeing the monkeys just disappeared, went away. And immediately tears came to his eyes. बचन काय मन मम गति जाई सपने बूझिए विपति किताई. And then he says, do you really think that if somebody depends on me, could they ever dream of being in such difficulty? Sri Ram is describing to Hanumanji. So he's trying to be defensive at this point, that I understand, but you know, somebody in this situation shouldn't be in so grave a danger. सुन सीता तो ही उरन में नाही देखे कर विचार मन माही. Then he refers to Hanumanji. Listen, my son, you have done so much for me. You have brought me her message and everything. I am in such debt to you. Puni puni kapihi chitav suratrata lochan neer pulak atigata. And Bhagwan Sri Ram is again still crying. Hanumanji is crying while deliver the messages. And this is such an emotional part of Sundarkand. They're both crying. They're both full of emotions. And this is where Hanumanji further pushes the emotional message forward. Suni Prabhu Bachan Bilo ke mukh gaat harash Hanumant charan prayo prema kula trahi trahi bhagavant. Hanumanji falls to Sri Ram Bhagwan's feet and he's just exclaiming in loud crying and pain, saying, save me, Lord. And he's delivering it both from his perspective that, I did this, but I don't want to fall into that ego of having achieved this for you. But he's also kind of delivering that message that this is the state that Sita Mata is in. बार बार प्रभु चाहे उठावा प्रेम मगन ते ही उठब न भावा प्रभु कर पंकज कपिके सीसा सुमिरी सुदसा मगन गौरीसा. This is what happens now. Shri Ram repeatedly is trying to get Hanumanji up from his feet, but Hanumanji keeps dropping back because he is just torn, he is broken, he is crying, and he's delivering such an impactful message that this is the state that I am, having seen Sita Mata. Just imagine the state Sita Mata herself is in. And they're both crying, they're both highly emotional. And that's where here it's referred that Prabhu Sri Ram puts his hand on Hanumanji's head. And at that point, describing this part to Uma, Sumiri Sudasa Magan Gaurisa, as this situation Shiv Bhagwan is describing to Uma, Savadhan Man Kari Puni Sankar, his emotions got out of his hand. Shiv Bhagwan's emotions got out of his hands. But in the next line, he says, Savdhan man kari puni mani Shankar. So Shankar then collects his emotions again, because this was such a painful part for him to describe. And he continues to describe the rest of the story. Lage kahan kathati sundar. That's when he says, Kapi uthai prabhu hriday lagawa. Ramji picks up, lifts up Hanumanji and embraces him, gives him a hug. Karagahi param nikat baithava. Now to settle everybody down, because everybody's crying, they all sit down. Hanumanji, Sri Ram asks Hanumanji to sit right next to him. Kahu kapi Ravan palit Lanka kehi vidhi dahyo durg atibanka. Now tell me about Ravan and his Lanka. What kind of damage and destruction did you do there? So Sri Ram is trying to divert the conversation from this difficult one, but he got the message that he needed to get. Prabhu prasanna jana Hanumana bola bachan bigat abhimana. Hanumanji says, well, now that he sees Sri Ram has collected himself and is in a better state of mind, so he describes everything that he did, but he does it without pride, without arrogance. And this is important again, because having achieved a significant feat, we usually fall victim to our own arrogance and ego. Hanumanji is free from that, and that's where he's describing Sakha mrig ke badi manusai, Sakha te Sakha par jai, Nagi sindhu hatak pur jara, Nisichar gan badhi bipin ojara. So sab tab pratap raghurai, nath na kach mori prabhutai. He says, Prabhu, I'm a monkey. It is in my nature to jump from one place to another. That's all I did in Lanka. I just kept jumping left and right, here and there. And then I jumped across the ocean, came here. It just so happens that when I was doing that, a lot of Nisichar, a lot of the demons died. It turns out I also end up destroying parts of Ashokvan from my jumping around. But none of it is because of me. It's all your pratap. It's all your blessings. It's all your glory that I was able to achieve all these things that I did. So very beautifully described. Doesn't go, oh, I destroyed this. I killed Akshay Kumar. No, he's like, it's in my nature as a monkey to jump around. All I did was jump around a little more. That's it. तब रघुपति कपिपति ही बुलावा, कहा चले कर करौ बनावा, अब विलंब के ही कारण कीजे, तुरत कपिन कहु आयस दीजे, कौतुक देखि सुमन बहु बरसी, नभते भवन चले सुर हर्षि. So immediately we can see the effect. Sri Ram orders Sugriv to gather the entire army of monkeys and bears, and that they were going to march towards Lanka. And they all assemble. All sorts of good omens come up. Sri Ram is facing all these good omens, and it's written here that Paraki Bam Agjan Kahi Dehi, that good omen happened to Sita Mata. Her left arm shook or shivered, and apparently that was considered a good omen in the time if that happens to a woman. But if it happens to a man, it's a bad omen. Joy joy saguna janki hoi, asaguna bhayo ravana hi soi. So all these good omens were happening with Sita Mata, but then all bad omens were occurring with Ravan. Chala katak ko bar nahi para, garjahi banar bhalu apara. So the army starts moving. As they go forward, they are screaming, they are roaring. The monkeys, the bears. Nakh ayudh giri pad padhari, chale gagan mahi chari. Ke hari nad bhalu kapidarhi, dagmagahi chikkar diggajhi. So they roared like monkeys and lions, and the march of this army was so loud that it shook the ground. That's how forceful this army was. And this section describes the march itself. Tulsidas ji uses a different tone here altogether. चिकर ही दिग्गज डोल मही गिरि लोल सागर खर भरे मन हर्ष सब गंधर्व सुर मुनि नाग किन्नर दुख टरे कट कट ही मरकट बिकट भट बहु कोटि कोटि न धावहि जय राम प्रबल प्रताप कौशल नाथ गुण गण गावहि सही सकन भार उदार अहिपति बार बार ही मोहि गह दसन पुनि पुनि कमठ प्रेष्ट कठोर सो के मिसोहि रघुबीर रुचिर प्रयान प्रस्थिति जानी परम सुहावनी जनु कमथ खर पर सर्प राज सुलिखत अविचल पावनी. Again, Tulsidas ji uses words that emphasize the sounds, the loudness of this march that is occurring, and he describes about the movement of the army and how the gods are all happy above. They're dropping flowers, and it's just a description of how as we move forward, we are now going into the time when soon everybody's pains will be relieved. एहि विधि जाई कृपा निधि उतरे सागर तीर जह तह लागे खान फल भालु विपुल कपिबीर. And finally the army reaches the shore, and now they will have this daunting task to cross the ocean and go over into Lanka. So that ends today's session. Next, we will talk about everything that occurs at the shore, what occurs at Lanka, and then eventually we will end Sundarkand with the moment Sri Ram Bhagwan's feet touch Lanka's soil. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity again. Jai Shri Ram, Jai Hanuman.
Thank you, Sanjeev ji. Steve, are you ready for Hanuman Chalisa?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yes, please go. Thank
Shri Guru Charan Saroj Raje Nij Mani Mukur Sudhare Varanau Raghuvara Vimala Jasu Jodayaku Falachare Buddhihina Tan Janike Sumiro Pavana Kumara Bala Buddhi Vidya Dehu Mohi Harahu Kale Savikara Jai Hanuman Nana Guna Sagar Jai Kapi Sati Loku Jagar Ramadutu Atulita Baladama Anjani Putra Pavan Sutanama Mahavira Vikrama Bajrangi Kumati Nivaru Sumati Ke Sangi Kanjana Varana Viraj Subesa Kanana Kundala Kunchita Kesa Hatha Vajra और ध्वजा विराजे कांधे मूंज जने साजय शंकर सुवन केसरी नंदन तेज प्रताप महाजगवंदन विद्यावान गुणी अति चातुर राम काज करिबे को आतुर प्रभु चरित्र सुनिबे को रसिया राम लखन सीता मन बसिया सूक्ष्म रूप धरि सिया ही दिखावा विकट रूप धरि लंक जरावा भीम रूप धरि असुर संहारे रामचंद्र के काज संवारे लाए संजीवन लखन जियाए श्री रघुवीर हर शिवर लाए रघुपति कीन्ही बहुत बधाए तुम मम प्रिय भरतहि सम भाए सहस बदन तुमरो यश गावे उस कहि श्रीपति कंठ लगावे सनकादिक ब्रह्मादि मुनीसा नारद सारद सहित ईसा यम कुबेर दिगपाल जहांते कवि कोविद कह सके कहांते तुम उपकार सुग्रीव ही कीना राम मिलाए राजपद दीना तुम्हारो मंत्र विभीषण माना लंकेश्वर भय सब जग जाना युग सहस्त्र जो जन पर भानु लील्योताहि मधुर फल जानू प्रभु मुद्रिका मेलि मुख माही चल दिलांगे गए अजरज नाही दुर्गम काज जगत के जेते सुगम अनुग्रह तुम्हारे तेते राम दुआरे तुम रखवारे हो तुन आज्ञा बिनु पैसारे शुभ सुख लहे तुम्हारी सरना तुम रक्षक काहू को डरना आपन तेज समारो आपै तीनों लोक हांकते कान पाए भूत पिशाच निकट नहीं आवे महावीर जब नाम सुनावे नासे रोग हरे सब बीरा जपत निरंतर हनुमत बीरा संकट से हनुमान जुरावे मन करण वचन ध्यान जो लावे सब पर राम तपस्वी राजा तिनके काज सकल तुम साजा और मनोरथ जो कोई लावे सोही अमित जीवन फल पावे, चारों युग परताप तुम्हारा, है प्रसिद्ध जगत उजियारा। साधु संत के तुम रखवारे, असुर निकंदन राम दुलारे। अष्ट सिद्धि नवनिध के दाता, उस वर दीन जानकी माता। राम रसायन तुम्हारे पासा, सदा रहो रघुपति के दासा। तुम्हारे भजन राम को पावे, जन्म जन्म के दुख बिसरावे। अंत काल रघुवीर पुर जाए, जहाँ जन्म हरि भक्त कहाई। और देवता चित्त न डरहि, हनुमत से ही सर्व सुख करहि। संकट कटे मिटे सब वीरा, जो सुमिरे हनुमत बलवीरा। जय 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 हनुमान गुसाहे, कृपा करहु गुरुदेव की न्याय। जो सत बार पाठ कर कोई, छूते ही बंदी महासुख होई। जो यह पदे हनुमान चालीसा, होय सिद्धि साखी गौरीसा। तुलसीदास सदा हरि चेरा, कीजे दास हृदय मंडेरा। पवन तनय संकट हरना, मंगल मूर्ति रूप। राम लखन सीता सहित, हृदय बसहु सुरभूप।
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Dr. Raju?
ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः. We have but 5 minutes if anyone has any comments or questions. Just wonderful journey. And Sanjeev, thank you so much once again. It was just fantastic once again today. As you said, there is a fervor of devotion and emotion and message that is for our life and at work or at home and for our personality development all through this Sundarakanda, which you have been making it a point to point out each time at each aspect of Hanuman's journey and return. In Valmiki Ramayana, there are a few things which are elaborated and a few things which are conveyed in a different way. And this Sundarakanda is a mantra shastra. And as you see, it starts with ta, tato ravana netaya, and ends with ta. So again, the last sloka begins with tato and then ends with ta. So this tat shabda is indicative of Parabrahma. And also, as we know, the Gayatri mantra also starts with tat. Then the point which you said, how Hanuman conveys in just one succinct word, drishta, drishta sita, drishta maya. So drishta in Sanskrit is, it has been commented by many commentators that drishta is enough to say that she has been seen. Because if a man has been seen, if you say drishtaha, so if a book has been seen, you say drishtam. And if a female has been seen, so drishta, that's more than enough to say. So it's like done, seen, the whole message has been conveyed. When he talks to Jambavan, because of his closeness, he elaborates so much and then tells all detail. But when it comes to Rama, he just was so succinct, so professional, and so devotional. And like you said, he never has arrogance or shows arrogance or any time. He just thinks that it is Ramakarya. Dasoham Kosalendrasya. Even when he does the Jaya Panchakam, Jayatyati Balo Ramo, Lakshmanascha Mahabalaha, and then Dasoham Kosalendrasya. Then Madhuvan has been described a little bit more in detail in Valmiki Ramayana. So I guess, the celebration began there in Ramayana, Treta Yuga, I guess, after succeeding. So he and Angad let all the Vanaras to celebrate in Madhuvan. And Sugriva senses that, when Hanuman is there, if the Vanaras are enjoying in Madhuvana, that means the work has been done. He assures Rama. And again, his words to Sita Devi are so appeasing. And he conveys the same thing to Rama, that Sita Devi has attained a little bit of peace with my words. And now, Rama, it is you now to carry on. And Rama gives this Parishvanga, embraces Hanuman in the beginning of Yuddhakanda. So that is how Valmiki Ramayana slightly differs from Tulsi Ramayana, but it is all, these are drashtas, these are mantra drashtas, these are the seers, Tulsidas, Valmiki ji, and many other poets. Thank you so much. It just, I'm so impressed by the way you chant Sundarakand, Sanjeev. It's a treat to listen to you chanting.
Thank you, Dr. Raju. It's been a pleasure. Again, thank you for inviting me for this. Next week will be the last of the sessions, and I encourage everybody to attend again. Due to limitations on time, there's only so much I can present. The Madhuvan part is also presented in the Sri Ram Charitmanas, but I ended up having to skip it. Yeah, I ended up having to skip it, but it's just normal. And I'm afraid that next week we'll be skipping a lot more too, because a lot happens here on one side, and then a lot happens on the other side as well. And like you said, right, the words, they're just so full of devotion, and every word has been so carefully crafted in there by Tulsidas ji that it's difficult to select them, to fit them within a given amount of time and still do justice to the words that have been selected. It's just, but we'll tackle that next week again. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Shubharatri, everyone. And next week, it's a great session again. So maybe welcome all of you. It will be a wonderful week next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Raju. Good night. Good night.